Hello writer, and welcome back to my life. Writer Wednesday, the day that I give you my best tips and advice on the art and the business of writing and tell you how I do what I do as an indie author. Today I want to talk to you about differentiating your characters. The way I see it and the way I try to apply it in my writing, there are two main ways to differentiate your characters. The first is who they are, and the second is how they act. The two are obviously closely related, but there are some important differences, so let's get into it. So one thing a lot of writers struggle with, and which I myself definitely struggle with, is trying not to make characters who are too much the same as each other. And one very easy way to switch this up is to change who they are as people, which can be described as a bunch of different ways. Again, we don't want to get into an existential question of what is a person, but history and backstory can and should be different. You don't want all of your characters to be bereft orphans. They're going to end up having a lot of too similar life experiences. Did they come from a happy background or a sad one? An affluent background or a poor one? Were they well educated, poorly educated? Were they extremely adept physically and had lots of opportunity to work on their physical health and competence? Or were they more academic? And most importantly, who were they natively as a child? And then what has happened to them in their life to color the way that they view the world? You don't want every character to be an optimist. You don't want every character to be a pessimist. You don't want every character to think that everyone is evil. You don't want every character to think that everyone is good. As a way of illustrating why this is important, let's say that you have two characters, a main character and her friend, and someone else comes to them and delivers information that may help them defeat the bad guy. If your main character is mostly optimistic, she will take this advice because it is going to help her achieve what she wants to do and to remove a threat or somebody who's doing bad things in the world. Whereas your pessimistic character is going to view it in a very different light. Why is this person giving us this information? Is this a trap? Is this a big scheme by the bad guy to make us reveal ourselves so that they can destroy us? That immediately creates tension between the two characters. They are immediately at odds because they view the world in very different ways. You know that I mostly try to write character-based stories, and one of the best ways to have awesome characters is to have different characters who interact and create tension between each other. Lauren from the Nightblade epic is plucky, very physically adept, but also a little bit naive and definitely not very self-aggrandizing. Whereas Jem, one of her best friends, has the same physical adeptness and some shared life experiences, but is self-aggrandizing enough for both of them, to the point where he is often boasting about Lauren's exploits, much to her dismay. And meanwhile, the third member of that trio, Annis, has almost no physical capabilities or special skills at all, but is one of the most brilliant minds that Lauren has ever encountered in her travels. Not only can she read, which Lauren cannot, but she has deep knowledge of history and mercantile connections and how royalty works. And because of their different backgrounds, they view the world in very, very different ways, which means that anytime the trio comes to a new situation, there is immediately some, okay, how are we going to do this with all three of the characters sort of arguing with each other and each trying to make their point? And that's just interesting. If they all came from the same village as Lauren, all had the same abusive parents as Lauren, and were all as physically capable as Lauren, why are the other two there? Why not just have Lauren? All right, let's move on to the second way that it's very, very, very important to differentiate your characters, and that is in how they act. This is obviously going to be informed or drawn from who they are and what their backstory is, but there are some particulars that we need to look at. Obviously, their backstory and their life experiences are going to affect the sorts of decisions that they make, but once they've made those decisions, how do they enact them? This does go into broader concepts like, are they more confident? Are they more sneaky? Do they prefer to do things out in the open, or do they prefer nobody to know what's going on until the last possible moment? But another part of this that can be very, very important in helping your reader really feel like these are distinct and different people who they, sort of know, is the small details. First among these can be, how does your character talk? What is their syntax? What sort of dialect do they use? Do they speak with lots of punchy, active verbs all the time? Are they more reserved? Do they pause a bit more? Do they just talk a bit less than their companions because they're more thoughtful? Do they say everything in a sort of subservient, propitiative tone because they just really want everybody to like them? You should really spend some time working on this for each of your characters, and you should try to instill your book with it so much that when a situation comes up or when somebody says something, your reader can kind of already guess what each different character is going to say. If anything, this is my great struggle with writing my characters, because all of my characters, especially in the first draft, tend to talk a little bit like me. And one of my hardest jobs in the revising and editing process is making sure that they're not all just different incarnations of me, that they are their own people who talk differently and approach situations in their own way. And then it extends into mannerisms. These can be broader mannerisms, such as the way that they walk, or do they prefer to move quickly or slowly? Do they look around a lot, always wary of danger, or are they slightly more oblivious to the bad things that could happen to them in their life? Are they sort of a sightseer where they're always looking at the beautiful sights and maybe ignoring the goblin who's creeping up through the bushes? And then there are their smaller mannerisms as well, chewing their nails, pulling their hair, flicking their fingers against each other. There are 1,000 little things that human beings do that can help orient your reader as to the sort of person that they are and remind them which character they are reading about right now. All of these things are going to make your world more real, they're going to make your characters more real, but most importantly, they're going to make your story better. Because a book that is about a cast of characters who are all way too similar to each other, it lacks tension, it lacks meaning. If everyone is mostly the same, who cares who wins? But by doing your best to represent the actual complexity and difference of opinion and character and mannerism and manner that exists in human beings in the real world, you are going to create a story that is going to mean a lot more to your reader. And that is all I've got for you today, writer. This video, like all my Writer Wednesday videos, is brought to you by my supporters on Patreon, and my $5 patrons get to see these videos 2 weeks early. They're also the only ones who can ask questions for me to answer in future videos, so if you want to be one of those awesome and incredibly attractive individuals, click on the Patreon link in the description below. I really appreciate the support, and I will see you next Wednesday. Bye!